My name is Ethan Hayes, and I am a ghost. Or at least, that's what it felt like on the most important day of my academic life. I was sitting in the third row at the California Institute of Technology's doctoral graduation ceremony, a sea of black robes and beaming families around me. The Southern California sun beat down on the manicured lawn, making the tassels on our caps shimmer like gold. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, expensive perfume, and the electric buzz of accomplishment. Every so often, a cheer would erupt from the crowd as a name was called. A family celebrating the culmination of nearly a decade of brutal, relentless work. I could see them all so clearly. A mother dabbing her eyes with a tissue. A father puffing his chest out with pride. Siblings holding up embarrassing homemade signs. They were constants, anchors in the tumultuous sea of academia. My anchors, however, were 275 miles away in Las Vegas, celebrating the grand opening of my older brother's newest business venture. I clutched the commencement program in my hand, my knuckles white. I'd circled my name earlier, Dr. Ethan M. Hayes, Ph.D., Aerospace Engineering. It looked so official, so final. For 8 years, this was the summit I had been climbing. 8 years of sleeping in the lab, of existing on lukewarm coffee and the stale crumbs from a vending machine. 8 years of missed holidays, canceled plans, and relationships that withered on the vine because my research was a jealous mistress that demanded all of my attention. I had poured my entire being, every ounce of my youth and energy, into a dissertation on advanced composite materials for deep space travel. I had solved equations that had stumped my predecessors and developed a proprietary alloy that was, in the words of my advisor, quietly revolutionary. And today, I was supposed to be recognized for it. I was supposed to be seen. But as I scanned the rows of seats, I had reserved 4 empty chairs in a row. A familiar hollow ache settled deep in my chest. It was the same ache I'd felt at my high school valedictorian speech, my undergraduate ceremony at MIT, and every single one of my birthdays for the last decade. It was the ache of being invisible to the people who were supposed to see me most clearly. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't help myself. It was a group text from my family. A picture of them, my father, Richard, my mother, Eleanor, my brother, Leo, and my sister Chloe, all raising champagne glasses in a flashy, over-the-top Vegas steakhouse. Leo, ever the golden boy, was center stage, his arm draped around a cocktail waitress. The caption from my father read, "Leo does it again. The new branch is a certified hit. So proud of our boy." I could almost hear his booming voice, the one that filled every room and left no space for anyone else's achievements. I typed out a reply, my fingers trembling slightly. "Ceremony is starting." The 3 dots appeared, indicating someone was typing, and then they vanished. A minute later, a new message from my sister Chloe popped up. A picture of a ridiculously expensive handbag. "Should I get it in black or beige? Vegas is amazing." It was as if my message had never existed. I was a ghost in their machine, a notification to be swiped away. The dean's voice droned on, speaking of legacy, of changing the world, of the bright futures ahead of us. I tried to listen. I really did. But my mind was stuck on those 4 empty chairs. My father always said he believed in tangible success. "You can't build a house with a textbook, Ethan," he'd say, clapping me on the back a little too hard. He had built Hayes Construction from the ground up, a testament to steel, concrete, and good old-fashioned grit. My brother, Leo, was his heir apparent, a business major who knew how to schmooze clients and slap backs, even if he couldn't tell a load-bearing wall from a drywall partition. Leo's successes were tangible. New contracts, bigger trucks, and now, a flashy new office in Las Vegas. My success was abstract, a collection of theories and formulas scribbled on a whiteboard, a 400-page document that only a handful of people on the planet could fully comprehend. To my family, my PhD wasn't an achievement. It was a hobby I'd taken a little too seriously, a detour from the real world of dirt and dollars. When they finally called my name, the applause from my cohort was generous. My advisor, Dr. Evans, who had become more of a father to me than my own, stood up and whistled through his teeth. I walked across the stage, shook the university president's hand, and accepted the leather-bound tube that held my diploma. I smiled for the camera, a practiced, hollow expression I had perfected over years of quiet disappointment. As I walked back to my seat, I made a promise to myself. This was it. This was the last time I would wait for their approval. The last time I would let their absence carve a hole in my accomplishment. From this day forward, I would build my own world, one where my work mattered, where I was seen. I had my degree. I had a few promising job prospects at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and a private aerospace firm. I would be fine. I would move on. That night, I didn't go out to celebrate. I just went back to my small, cluttered apartment off campus. The place smelled of old books and soldering fumes. I ordered a pizza, the same kind I ate almost every night, and opened a beer. I put my diploma on the coffee table and just stared at it. It felt anticlimactic, a quiet end to a very loud war. I scrolled through my sister's social media. She'd posted a dozen stories from Vegas. The casino floor, the nightclub, the ridiculously large suite they were staying in. There was a video of my father giving a toast to Leo, his voice thick with emotion. To my son, who carries the Hayes legacy forward. He makes this family proud. I clicked the phone off, the familiar bitterness rising in my throat. I decided to sort through the mountain of mail that had piled up over the last few weeks of frantic dissertation writing. Bills, junk mail, a few alumni magazines. And then I saw it. A thick, cream-colored envelope at the bottom of the stack. It was heavy, made from expensive cardstock. There was no return address, only a sophisticated, embossed seal on the back that I didn't recognize, a stylized phoenix rising from a circle of stars. My name and address were written on the front in elegant hand-drawn calligraphy. It felt different from the other mail, important. I almost threw it away, thinking it was some kind of ostentatious wedding invitation. But curiosity got the better of me. I slid my finger under the seal and broke it. Inside was a single, folded sheet of the same heavy paper. The letterhead was simple, bearing the same phoenix seal and 2 words, the Blackwood Foundation. I had never heard of it. I began to read, and as I did, the entire trajectory of my life, the very foundation of my quiet, invisible existence, began to fracture. The words on the page didn't just offer a new future. They held up a mirror to my past, and they were about to send a shockwave through my family that would shatter the very world they thought they controlled. You see, my family thought they knew my value. They had weighed it, measured it, and found it wanting. But they had no idea what was in this letter. They had no idea that their biggest mistake wasn't just skipping my graduation, it was underestimating the son they had never bothered to know. And if you're watching this right now, and you've ever felt overlooked or undervalued by the people who should have been your biggest fans, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next is a lesson in how the quietest person in the room can sometimes make the most noise. To understand why those 4 empty chairs at my graduation felt less like a simple absence and more like a final judgment, you have to understand the family I come from. We weren't just a family. We were a dynasty of our own making, forged in concrete and ambition. My father, Richard Hayes, was the architect of it all. He was a force of nature, a man who saw the world in terms of foundations, blueprints, and bottom lines. He started Hayes Construction with a single used pickup truck and a toolbox, and through sheer, unadulterated willpower, built it into the largest commercial development firm in San Diego. He was a living testament to the American dream, and he never let us forget it. Our sprawling home in La Jolla, with its panoramic ocean views and perfectly manicured gardens, was his monument to success. But it was also a fortress, with walls so thick that my reality could never seem to penetrate them. My father's love was conditional, and the condition was always relevance to his world. He respected strength, tangible results, and a certain kind of chest-thumping bravado that I was simply not born with. I was a quiet kid, more interested in taking apart old radios than in learning how to drive a bulldozer. While he dreamed of me joining the family business, I was dreaming of the stars. I remember being 10 years old and building a scale model of the solar system for the school science fair. It was intricate, with tiny, hand-painted planets orbiting a glowing sun I'd rigged with a light bulb. I spent weeks on it, meticulously researching the distances, the rotations, the very colors of the atmospheric gases. I was so proud of it. On the day of the fair, my father was supposed to come. He'd promised. But a last-minute meeting to close a deal on a new high-rise development ran late. He sent my mother instead. I watched other fathers hoist their kids onto their shoulders, asking them to explain their baking soda volcanoes and potato batteries. My father, when he finally got home that night, glanced at the blue ribbon I'd won and grunted. "That's nice, Ethan. But you know, the real stars are the ones you can see from the penthouse of a skyscraper you built yourself." That was the moment I began to understand. My passions weren't just different. They were a disappointment. They were a currency that held no value in the Hayes family economy. The one who understood that economy perfectly was my older brother, Leo. Leo was my father's echo, a younger, slicker version of the same man. He was charming, athletic, and possessed an effortless confidence that made people want to like him. He got a business degree from USC, a school my father respected, and slid right into a vice president role at Hayes Construction. He wasn't particularly good at the details of the business. I knew, for a fact, that he'd nearly tanked a multi-million-dollar project by ordering the wrong grade of steel, but he was a master of the handshake and the sales pitch. He brought in clients, and to my father, that was all that mattered. Leo's world was a highlight reel of success. Every family dinner was a victory lap for him. A new contract signed, a new sports car purchased, a new beautiful woman on his arm. He was the sun in our family's solar system, and the rest of us were just tiny, forgotten planets in his orbit. My mother, Eleanor, was the peacemaker. She was a kind, gentle woman who had long ago learned that her own happiness was secondary to the volatile moods of her husband. She loved me. I know she did. She was the one who bought me my first telescope, whispering, "Don't tell your father how much this cost." She saw my passion, but she was powerless against the gravitational pull of my father's expectations. Her role was to smooth things over, to manage the family's image. When my father would dismiss my dreams, she would pat my arm and say, "He's just proud in his own way, dear. He doesn't always know how to show it." But her defense of him felt like a quiet betrayal of me. She was asking me to accept a fraction of the love and approval that was showered so freely upon Leo. She was asking me to be content with the shadows, while my brother basked in the perpetual sunlight. And then there was Chloe, my younger sister. Chloe was a product of our environment in a different way. She understood that in our family, value was determined by visibility. But instead of seeking it in the world of construction or academia, she found it on social media. By the time she was 20, she was a full-blown lifestyle influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers. Her life was a perfectly curated feed of brunches, beach sunsets, and designer outfits, all subtly branded with the Hayes name. She saw the family business not as a legacy of hard work, but as a backdrop, a provider of the aesthetic of wealth her followers craved. To Chloe, I was an anomaly. I was the boring, nerdy brother who didn't fit into her brand. When I tried to explain my research to her once, she'd stared at me with a blank expression before holding up her phone and saying, "That's cool. Hey, can you take a picture of me? The lighting is perfect right now." My decision to go to MIT for my undergraduate degree, and then Caltech for my PhD, was my first real act of rebellion. It was a declaration that I was choosing my world over theirs. My father had been furious. "A ridiculous waste of time and money," he'd bellowed. "You have a guaranteed future here, a multi-million-dollar company waiting for you, and you want to go off and play with toy rockets?" He couldn't understand that what he saw as a guarantee, I saw as a cage. A gilded cage, to be sure, but a cage nonetheless. He agreed to pay my tuition, but it felt less like a gift and more like a long-term, interest-free loan on his disappointment. Our phone calls during those years were stilted and brief. He'd ask if I'd come to my senses yet, and I'd try to explain the thrill of being on the cutting edge of aerospace technology. We were speaking different languages. He spoke of profit margins and square footage. I spoke of orbital mechanics and tensile strength. The few times I came home for holidays, I felt like a foreigner. The conversations always revolved around the business. Leo would hold court at the dinner table, recounting exaggerated stories of his boardroom triumphs. My father would listen, beaming with pride, occasionally throwing in a comment about how Leo had the gift. I would sit in silence. My own small victories, a published paper, a successful simulation, a compliment from a world-renowned professor dying on my lips. There was simply no space for them. Sharing them would have been like trying to describe the color blue to a room full of people who could only see in black and white, so I stopped trying. I retreated further into my work, into a world where I was judged not by my last name, but by the quality of my mind. My lab became my home, my colleagues, my family, and my advisor, Dr. Eris Evans, became the mentor and father figure I so desperately needed. He was a brilliant, cantankerous old physicist who saw something in me that my own family never had: potential. He pushed me, challenged me, and, for the first time in my life, he made me feel seen. He was the one who told me my dissertation wasn't just good, it was groundbreaking. He was the one who encouraged me to apply for things I never thought I was worthy of. Which brings me back to the letter. That heavy, cream-colored envelope sitting on my coffee table, a beacon in the quiet gloom of my apartment. It was a relic from a world I didn't think I belonged to, a world of prestige and recognition so far removed from the dirt and steel reality of the Hayes family. I had applied for the fellowship it represented months ago, on a whim, at Dr. Evans's insistence. It was a long shot, the academic equivalent of a lottery ticket. I had forgotten all about it. But now, here it was. And as I held it, a strange thought crossed my mind. What if my father was wrong? What if the world he couldn't see, the world of ideas and equations, had a value he couldn't possibly comprehend? The seal on the envelope seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was a doorway, and I was about to walk through it. The journey to that graduation stage wasn't just a matter of attending classes and passing exams. A PhD in aerospace engineering, especially at a place like Caltech, is a test of endurance designed to break you. It's an 8-year-long intellectual boot camp, and my life during that time was anything but glamorous. My world shrank to the size of a single building, the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory. It was an old, hallowed place, where the ghosts of scientists past seemed to linger in the chalk dust. My own personal corner of this world was a cramped, windowless lab in the sub-basement. It was my sanctuary and my prison. The only light came from the sterile fluorescence of the overhead lamps and the glow of my computer monitors. The air was a constant mix of ozone from the machinery, the sharp metallic scent of newly machined parts, and the ever-present aroma of burnt coffee. This small, sterile room was where I spent more time than my own apartment. My roommates were a high-powered electron microscope and a custom-built vacuum chamber for testing materials in a simulated space environment. My research focused on a problem that has plagued spacecraft for decades: material fatigue in extreme environments. When a vessel enters and exits atmospheres, or endures the unfiltered radiation of deep space, the materials it's made from are subjected to unimaginable stress. They become brittle, they crack, and they fail. My goal was to create a new class of carbon fiber composite, one that was not only stronger and lighter than anything that existed, but that could also, in a sense, heal itself on a microscopic level. It was ambitious, bordering on science fiction, and most days, it felt utterly impossible. There were months on end where every experiment was a failure. I'd spend weeks fabricating a new sample of the alloy, a painstaking process of layering carbon nanotubes in a polymer matrix, only to watch it shatter during stress tests. Each failure was a punch to the gut, a whisper in my ear that my father was right, that I was wasting my time on childish fantasies. It was during those moments of crushing despair that Dr. Evans would materialize in my lab, usually after midnight, holding 2 styrofoam cups of terrible coffee. He was a small, wiry man in his late 60s, with a wild mane of white hair and eyes that still sparkled with an insatiable curiosity. He had been a legend at JPL, part of the team that designed the Voyager probes, and he had forgotten more about astrophysics than I would ever know. He never offered easy encouragement. Instead, he'd look at my failed test results, at the tangled mess of equations on my whiteboard, and he'd find the one variable I hadn't considered, the one tiny flaw in my methodology. "The universe doesn't give up its secrets easily, Hayes," he'd grumble, tapping a finger on a graph. "If it were easy, everyone would do it. Your mistake isn't the failure. Your mistake is thinking the failure isn't part of the answer. Now, walk me through your thermal expansion coefficient calculations again. I think you're off by an order of magnitude." He was tough, demanding, and brutally honest. And for that, I revered him. He wasn't just teaching me science, he was teaching me resilience. He was providing the intellectual foundation that my own father had refused to acknowledge. There was a stark contrast between my life in the lab and the life my family was living. While I was wrestling with quantum mechanics, Leo was closing a deal on a new luxury condo development. While I was celebrating a successful simulation by eating an entire pizza by myself, Chloe was posting pictures from a yacht party in the Mediterranean. Our worlds didn't just diverge, they existed in different galaxies. The few times I tried to bridge that gap were disastrous. I remember calling my father one night, buzzing with excitement. I had just had a breakthrough, a genuine eureka moment where I'd solved a critical flaw in my composite's molecular structure. I tried to explain it to him, my words tumbling out in a rush of scientific jargon. "Dad, I figured it out. By introducing bismuth nanoparticles into the polymer matrix, I can create a self-lubricating lattice that actually redirects kinetic energy from microfractures." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, I heard him call out to my mother, "Eleanor, can you believe this? I'm talking about pouring the foundation for the new Westfield Tower, a 50-story building that will change the San Diego skyline, and my son is on the phone talking about, what was it again, Ethan? Bismuth particles." I could hear the condescending chuckle in his voice. "Son, call me back when you've built something I can stand on." That was the last time I tried to share the specifics of my work with him. From then on, our conversations were superficial. I learned to give the answers he wanted to hear. "How's school?" he'd ask. "It's fine," I'd say. "Working hard." I let them believe I was just a perpetual student, hiding from the real world in an ivory tower. It was easier than facing their constant, casual dismissal. The isolation was profound. It's a strange thing to be on the verge of a discovery that could one day protect astronauts on their way to Mars, and yet feel utterly incapable of connecting with your own family. The loneliness was a physical presence, a cold weight in the room. But I used it. I channeled all of that frustration, all of that hurt into my work. My research became my obsession, my singular focus, and slowly, painstakingly, it started to pay off. The failures became less frequent. The alloy began to perform as my models predicted. In my final year, I produced a sample that withstood forces and temperatures that were, according to current material science, impossible. I had done it. My dissertation was more than just a paper. It was a blueprint for the future of space exploration. It was Dr. Evans who first mentioned the Blackwood Fellowship. He brought it up one afternoon as we were reviewing the final draft of my thesis. "You know, Ethan," he said, peering at me over his spectacles, "this is more than just a PhD. This is legacy work. It deserves a bigger stage. He slid a brochure across his desk. It was for the Blackwood Foundation, a private, almost mythical organization founded by the late tech billionaire and visionary, Dr. Eris Thorne. Thorne had been a recluse, a modern-day Howard Hughes of the tech world, and his foundation was notoriously secretive. The Blackwood Fellowship, the brochure explained, was awarded to just one postdoctoral researcher in North America each year. The winner was given a $5 million research grant, a position as a lead researcher at Thorne's legendary private R&D facility, known only as The Forge, and direct mentorship under the Foundation's anonymous board of directors, rumored to be comprised of the greatest scientific minds on the planet. It was the Nobel Prize for people who hadn't even started their careers yet. It was a kingmaker. "Don't be ridiculous, Eris," I'd laughed. "That's for prodigies, for real-life Tony Starks. I'm just a guy who's good at math." He'd fixed me with a stern look. "Don't ever let your father's definition of success become your own. Your work is more than good at math. It's elegant. It's important. Apply. The worst they can do is say no." So I did. I spent 2 weeks compiling my research, writing essays on my vision for the future, and securing letters of recommendation. I sent it off into the void, never expecting to hear anything back. I promptly forgot about it, focusing instead on the final, grueling push to defend my dissertation and graduate. The application felt like a dream, a fantasy. My reality was the lab, the equations, and the looming date of a graduation I knew, deep down, I would be attending alone. 2 weeks before the graduation ceremony, my dissertation had been successfully defended. The grueling, 3-hour oral examination in front of a panel of 5 of the most intimidating professors in the field was over. I had passed with distinction. A wave of relief so profound it almost brought me to my knees washed over me. The war was over. All that was left was the victory parade, the graduation ceremony itself. And for a fleeting, hopeful moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. This wasn't just another degree. This was a doctorate from one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. This was the finish line of a marathon they had watched me run from a distance for 8 long years. Surely, this time, they would show up. I chose to make the call on a Sunday afternoon, thinking it would be a quiet, relaxed time for them. I pictured them at home, perhaps sitting on the patio overlooking the ocean. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, keeping my tone light and casual, not wanting to sound like I was begging. I dialed the familiar number, and my mother answered, her voice warm but distracted. "Ethan, honey, how are you? We were just talking about you." I felt a flicker of hope. "I'm good, Mom. Actually, I have some great news. I successfully defended my dissertation on Friday. It's official. I'm done." There was a pause. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Richard, get on the extension. It's Ethan. He's finished his paper." The word paper was like a tiny pinprick to my ballooning hope. It wasn't a paper. It was the culmination of my life's work. My father's voice crackled on the line, impatient as always. "Ethan, good to hear from you. So you're finally done with all that school nonsense, huh? Ready to get a real job?" I ignored the jab, forcing a smile into my voice. "Yes, sir. And the graduation ceremony is in 2 weeks, on Saturday the 21st. I've reserved 4 tickets for you guys. It would really mean a lot to me if you could all be there." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, pregnant with disappointment. I could hear my father sigh, a sound of pure exasperation that I knew all too well. "A Saturday? Ethan, you know how busy Saturdays are. And in Pasadena? That's a hell of a drive." Before I could respond, I heard Leo's voice in the background, loud and self-important. "Is that Ethan? Tell him he picked a hell of a weekend to graduate." He grabbed the phone from my father. "Hey, little brother. Congrats on finishing your science project. Listen, you're not going to believe this. but we're launching the new Vegas office that weekend. It's the biggest expansion in Hayes construction history. Dad's pulling out all the stops. We're flying in clients. There's a massive party at the Bellagio. It's a whole thing. You should see the suite Dad booked for me. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. Your office opening is on the same day as my graduation? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yeah, crazy timing, right? Leo said, completely oblivious to the implication. Look, obviously, we can't make it to your thing. This is a command performance. Dad's calling it the official passing of the torch. It's a huge deal for me, for the company. I could hear Chloe in the background now, her voice a high-pitched whine. Oh my God, I have to get a new dress for Vegas. Graduation ceremonies are so boring anyway. All that sitting around in the Sunday, you get, like, zero good content from it. Each word was a fresh shovel of dirt on the grave of my hope. They weren't just choosing not to come. They were trivializing the single greatest achievement of my life as if it were an inconvenience, a poorly timed scheduling conflict. My mother finally came back on the line, her voice laced with a practiced, placating tone. Ethan, honey, we are so proud of you. We really are. It's just, this Vegas trip has been planned for months. Leo has worked so hard on this expansion. Your father sees it as the future of the company. Her words were meant to soothe, but they only poured salt on the wound. Leo's hard work. What about my hard work? What about the 8 years I had poured into my research? Did that not count? Did that not deserve a single day of their time? I see, I said, my voice flat, all the forced cheerfulness gone. So none of you are coming. My father grabbed the phone back, his tone brusque, as if my disappointment was an annoyance he needed to dispense with. Look, son, let's be realistic. What you did is a fine personal accomplishment, and we congratulate you. But what Leo is doing is for the family. It's for the legacy. We'll take you out for a nice steak dinner next time you're in town to celebrate. My treat. A steak dinner. That was his solution. A consolation prize for an achievement he couldn't be bothered to witness. In that moment, something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, clean fracture. The part of me that had spent a lifetime craving their approval, that had held out a sliver of hope that one day they would finally see me, just died. It withered away, leaving behind a calm, cold certainty. You don't have to do that, Dad, I said, and my own voice surprised me with its steadiness. Don't worry about it. I understand. The legacy is what's important. Good, he said, relieved that I wasn't going to put up a fight. That's my boy. Now, I've got to run. We're finalizing the guest list for the Vegas party. You take care, son. The line went dead. I stood there in my small, sun-drenched Pasadena apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. They weren't just skipping my graduation. They were, in the clearest way possible, telling me where I stood. I was secondary. My world, my achievements, my entire existence was a footnote in the grand, important story of Hayes construction. And as I looked around my apartment, at the stacks of books that reached the ceiling, at the whiteboard covered in a chaotic tapestry of equations, I realized that I had a choice. I could let this break me. I could let their rejection define the moment I had worked so hard for. Or I could accept it for what it was, the final, undeniable piece of evidence that my path was, and always had been, my own. I had to walk it alone. I hung up the phone. The silence of my apartment, a deafening roar. My graduation was in 2 days, and I would be attending it utterly and completely alone. The ceremony itself was a blur. I remember the weight of the doctoral hood being placed over my shoulders, the smooth, cool feel of the leather diploma case in my hand, the fleeting moment of eye contact with Dr. Evans, who gave me a proud fatherly nod from the faculty section. But mostly, I remember the silence. It was a strange, internal silence that seemed to hum beneath the noise of the cheering crowd. It was the silence of expectation unfulfilled, the quiet space where my family's applause should have been. I sat through the rest of the proceedings in a sort of detached haze, an observer at my own life event. When the final graduate had crossed the stage and the university president led us in the ceremonial turning of the tassels, a wave of emotion finally hit me. But it wasn't joy. It was a profound and overwhelming sense of finality. A chapter was over. Not just my academic chapter, but the chapter of my life where I waited for them to show up. After the ceremony, the lawn devolved into a happy, chaotic mob of families. Graduates were being swarmed by parents, hugged by siblings, and lifted into the air by jubilant friends. Cameras flashed, champagne corks popped, and laughter echoed across the campus. I stood on the periphery, a solitary island in a sea of celebration. A few of my colleagues came over to congratulate me, their own families in tow. They'd ask, "Where's your family, Ethan?" And I'd give them a practiced, vague smile. "Oh, they couldn't make it. A last-minute work thing. You know how at Island." They'd nod sympathetically, but I could see the pity in their eyes. They didn't understand. This wasn't a last-minute thing. It was a first priority thing. It was the way it had always been. Doctor. Evans found me near the refreshment tent, holding 2 plastic cups of lemonade. He handed one to me, his expression unreadable. "Well, you did it, Dr. Hayes," he said, his voice gruff. "Thank you, Eris. For everything," I replied, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. He just grunted, taking a long sip of his lemonade. "Your parents know what they missed today?" he asked, not looking at me. "They know," I said quietly. "They just don't care." He was silent for a moment, watching a young woman sob with joy in her father's arms. "Their loss, son," he finally said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Their profound and monumental loss. Don't you ever forget that." His words were a small, sturdy raft in the ocean of my loneliness. I held on to them as I made my excuses and began the long, quiet walk back to my apartment. The walk felt surreal. The world outside the campus gates was completely indifferent to the life-changing event that had just occurred. Cars whizzed by, people bustled along the sidewalks. Life went on. My doctoral robes felt like a costume from a play that had already ended. When I finally reached my apartment building, the familiar sight of its drab stucco facade felt like a return to reality. This was my world. Not the cheering crowds or the academic prestige, but this quiet, solitary space. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The first thing I saw was the blinking red light on my answering machine. It was blinking furiously, indicating multiple messages. Probably my landlord reminding me about rent. I ignored it and tossed my keys onto the counter. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. A controlled chaos of books, papers, and half-finished projects. My diploma, now freed from its ceremonial tube, lay on the coffee table. I picked it up, the embossed gold letters catching the afternoon light. It was real. I had earned this, and I had done it on my own. That was when my eyes fell on the pile of mail I had neglected for weeks. And at the bottom of that pile was the envelope. The thick, cream-colored envelope with the Phoenix seal. I had completely forgotten about it. In the whirlwind of defending my thesis and dealing with the emotional fallout from my family, it had slipped my mind. Now, in the dead quiet of my empty apartment, it seemed to call to me. It felt out of place, a piece of an alternate reality that had somehow found its way into mine. I picked it up. The quality of the paper a stark contrast to the flimsy bills and junk mail around it. It felt substantial, significant. I ran my thumb over the wax seal, a beautifully detailed phoenix rising from a circle of 12 stars. It was a symbol of rebirth, of rising from the ashes. The irony was not lost on me. I carried it over to my worn-out armchair, the one with the permanent indent from the thousands of hours I'd spent reading in it. I sat down and just looked at it for a long time. It was postmarked from a small town in Northern California I'd never heard of, a place called Serenity Peak. The calligraphy was perfect. a lost art in a world of printed labels. This wasn't just a letter, it was a statement. With a sense of trepidation I couldn't explain, I carefully broke the seal. The paper inside was even heavier than the envelope. It unfolded with a crisp, satisfying sound. The letterhead, like the seal, was minimalist and elegant. The Blackwood Foundation. I scanned the first few lines, my brain still struggling to process what was happening. Dear Dr. Hayes, it is with the utmost pleasure that the Board of Directors of the Blackwood Foundation informs you. My heart started to pound, a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I read on, my eyes devouring the words. It was a formal notification. The selection committee, after reviewing thousands of applications from the most promising young researchers in North America, had made their unanimous decision. The letter detailed the prize. It wasn't just a fellowship, it was a complete redefinition of a career, a $5 million unrestricted research grant to be used at my sole discretion, a 5-year appointment as a lead research fellow at the Forge, Dr. Eris Thorne's legendary and secretive R&D campus in Serenity Peak. But it was the final part of the offer that made the air leave my lungs. The fellowship included direct, one-on-one mentorship with the current head of the foundation. The letter didn't name them, referring to them only as the director, but it did mention that this individual had personally championed my application after reading my dissertation. I sat back in my chair, the letter trembling in my hand. It didn't feel real. It felt like a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and disappointment. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like me. I was the quiet, invisible son of a construction magnate. I was the nerdy kid who built models of the solar system. I wasn't a prodigy. I wasn't a genius. Was I? The letter was a formal, legally binding document. It was real. And as the reality of it began to sink in, a slow, burning fire started to build in my chest. It was a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to experience in a very long time. It was validation. Not from my family, not from the people whose approval I had so desperately craved, but from a group of anonymous, brilliant minds who had judged me on the only thing that had ever truly mattered to me, my work. They saw me, and they had decided I was worthy. The empty chairs at my graduation suddenly seemed very, very small. For the first hour after reading the letter, I did absolutely nothing. I just sat in my armchair, the thick paper resting in my lap, and I let the silence of the apartment be filled by the roaring in my own head. My mind was a whirlwind of disbelief, exhilaration, and a strange, unexpected grief. The joy was obvious. It was the joy of a lifetime of hard work being recognized on a scale I had never dared to imagine. $5 million. The Forge. A chance to work on projects that could genuinely change the course of human exploration. It was every dream I had ever had, rolled into one unbelievable package. But beneath the joy, there was a profound sadness. My first instinctive impulse after reading the letter was to pick up the phone and call my family. It was a reflex, a deeply ingrained habit from a lifetime of seeking their validation. I wanted to hear my father's shocked silence, my mother's tearful congratulations, even my brother's grudging respect. I wanted to share this monumental, life-altering victory with them, and then the reality of the situation crashed back down on me. I couldn't call them. How could I? How could I share my greatest triumph with the very people who couldn't even be bothered to witness the milestone that made it possible? What would I even say? Hey, Dad, remember that boring graduation you skipped for Leo's party? Well, it turns out I'm not such a failure after all. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. Sharing this news with them now would feel tainted. It wouldn't be a celebration. It would be a confrontation. It would become another tool in our family's dysfunctional dynamic, a way for them to either claim my success as their own, of course he's a genius, he's a Hayes, or to resent me for it. And I realized, with a startling clarity, that I didn't want to give them that power. This victory was mine. I had earned it in the sterile silence of my lab, fueled by their indifference. I had done it without them. Maybe, for the first time, I needed to celebrate it without them, too. So I made a decision. I folded the letter, slid it back into its elegant envelope, and placed it in the top drawer of my desk, underneath a stack of old research papers. For now, it would be my secret. My own private universe of possibility. I needed time to process it, to let it become a part of my own identity before I exposed it to the complicated gravity of my family. The letter stated I had 2 weeks to formally accept the fellowship. That was my window. 2 weeks to figure out how to be doctor. Ethan Hayes, Blackwood Fellow. Before I had to deal with being Ethan Hayes, the disappointing son. My first call wasn't to my family, but to the one person I knew would understand. I dialed Dr. Evans's number, my heart still racing. He answered on the second ring, his voice as gravelly as ever. "Evans. Eris," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Ethan. I need to tell you something." I explained the letter, my voice cracking with emotion as I read him the details. He was silent throughout, a rare occurrence for a man who loved to interrupt. When I finished, the silence stretched for a long moment. I thought maybe the line had disconnected. "Eris? Are you there?" I finally asked. I heard him clear his throat. When he spoke, his voice was thick with a pride that was so raw, so genuine, it brought tears to my eyes. "I knew it," he whispered. "From the first day you walked into my classroom, a skinny kid with eyes that were 100 years old, I knew you had the gift. I told you your work was elegant, Ethan. This is what elegance earns you." We talked for over an hour. He knew of the Blackwood Foundation, of course. He spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones. He told me stories about Eris Thorne, a man he had briefly met once at a conference decades ago. Thorne wasn't just a billionaire, he explained. He was a true believer. He believed that humanity's future depended on a handful of brilliant minds being given the freedom to create without the constraints of bureaucracy or profit margins. The Forge isn't just a lab, Ethan. It's a cathedral to innovation. What you will do there, it will change the world. Hearing his belief in me, his absolute unwavering conviction, was like a balm on the open wound of my family's neglect. He didn't just see my success. He saw its significance. He understood the language of my achievement in a way my family never could. "What are you going to do about your family?" he asked gently, towards the end of the call. "I don't know," I admitted. "For now, nothing. This one's for me." "Good," he said firmly. "Let it be yours. They'll find out eventually. The Foundation will issue a press release. This isn't the kind of thing that stays quiet for long. But for now, you just sit with it. You let yourself feel the weight of what you've accomplished. You earned this, son. Every last bit of it." Hanging up the phone, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Dr. Evans was right. The world would find out soon enough. And that thought led me to a new idea. A quiet, unsettling idea that began to take root in the back of my mind. My family had made their choice. They had chosen to be absent. What if I let them live with the consequences of that choice, just for a little while? What if I let them find out not from me, but from the world? It was a passive thought, not yet a plan, but it felt right. It felt like a balancing of the scales. For years, I had been a ghost in their world. Now, they would be ghosts in mine. They would be the last to know about the most important thing that had ever happened to me. The next few days were surreal. I went about my life, packing up my apartment, returning books to the library, but I was living a double life. Outwardly, I was the same quiet, unassuming graduate student. Inwardly, I was the custodian of a secret that felt like a supernova. The blinking light on my answering machine was still there. I had avoided it, but finally, curiosity won. I pressed the play button. The first message was from my landlord. The next two were hang-ups. The fourth was my mother's voice, sounding flustered. "Ethan, honey, it's me. We're back from Vegas." It was a lot. Leo's exhausted but happy. Your father is, well, he's your father. Anyway, we were thinking about that steak dinner you were promised. Are you free next weekend? Call me back. Her voice was so normal, so blissfully unaware. It was as if the graduation had never happened. A minor event that had passed without comment or consequence. She was trying to smooth things over, to apply her usual band-aid of denial to the situation. But the wound was too deep this time. A steak dinner wasn't going to fix it. I erased the message without a flicker of hesitation. For the first time, her attempt at peacemaking didn't stir guilt in me, only a cold, distant resolve. The first ripple of my new reality had reached their shore, and they hadn't even felt it. But the tsunami was coming, and it was going to be bigger than they could ever imagine. Just as Dr. Evans predicted, the quiet didn't last long. The Blackwood Foundation, for all its secrecy, understood the power of a good story. 3 days after I received the letter, they issued their official press release. It wasn't a flashy announcement, but a carefully worded, professional statement sent out to a select list of academic journals, university news departments, and major media outlets that covered science and technology. The headline was understated but powerful. Caltech aerospace engineer Dr. Ethan Hayes named 2025 Blackwood Fellow. The release was 2 pages long. It detailed my academic background, gave a simplified but impressive summary of my dissertation on self-healing composite materials, and included a glowing quote from the Foundation's anonymous director, which read, in part, Dr. Hayes's work represents a paradigm shift in material science. It is precisely the kind of bold, forward-thinking research the Blackwood Foundation was created to support. We believe his contributions will be instrumental in humanity's next great leap into the cosmos. At first, the impact was small. It was picked up by the Caltech alumni newsletter and a few niche science blogs. I saw it pop up in my own newsfeed and felt a strange, detached thrill, like reading about a character in a book who happened to have my name. I forwarded the link to Dr. Evans, who replied with a single word, "Told ya." I spent the day fielding calls and emails from excited colleagues and old professors, all offering their heartfelt congratulations. It was a pleasant, manageable wave of attention from a world that understood its significance. But I knew, with a growing sense of dread and anticipation, that this was just the beginning. The story was too good to stay in the quiet corners of academia. The tipping point came from an unexpected source. A young, ambitious reporter at the Los Angeles Times who specialized in long-form human interest stories saw the press release. He wasn't just interested in the science. He was interested in the story behind the science. He started digging. He called the Caltech press office. He interviewed Dr. Evans, who, in his typical cantankerous fashion, probably gave him a series of brutally honest and compelling quotes. And somehow, he must have learned about my family. Maybe he asked Dr. Evans if my family was proud, and my mentor's silence or gruff response told him everything he needed to know. Maybe he found my sister's social media and saw the stark contrast between her flashy lifestyle and the quiet, humble world of a graduate student. I don't know how he connected the dots, but he did. 2 days later, the story ran on the front page of the Sunday edition of the LA Times. The headline was no longer understated. It was a bombshell. The Lonely Orbit. How an unseen San Diego genius won a $5 million prize and a ticket to the stars. The article was a masterpiece of narrative journalism. It painted a vivid picture of me, the brilliant, overlooked son of a construction tycoon, toiling away in obscurity while my family celebrated more tangible successes. It quoted Dr. Evans extensively, who described my work with poetic reverence and my dedication with fatherly pride. It mentioned, with devastating subtlety, that on the day of my PhD graduation from Caltech, my family had been celebrating a business opening in Las Vegas. The reporter never explicitly called them bad parents or uncaring siblings. He didn't have to. He just laid out the facts, the stark, brutal contrast between their world and mine, and let the reader draw their own conclusions. The article was syndicated. It was picked up by national news outlets, by morning talk shows, by the voracious content machine of the internet. It went viral. The story had everything: a brilliant underdog, a dysfunctional family of wealthy elites, a secret benefactor, and the promise of a world-changing future. Number Lonely Orbit started trending on Twitter. My name, Ethan Hayes, was suddenly everywhere, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the shockwave reached the fortress in La Jolla. That moment came on Sunday evening. I was in my now mostly empty apartment, packing the last of my books into boxes, when my phone rang. It was Chloe. Her voice was a high-pitched shriek of pure panic. "Ethan, have you seen it? Have you seen the internet? It's everywhere. You have to do something." "Do something about what, Chloe?" I asked, my voice calm. "The article. The one in the LA Times. It's making us look horrible. People are leaving the most awful comments on my Instagram. They're calling me shallow. They're calling Dad a monster. My brand is being destroyed." Her concern wasn't for me, or for the fractured state of our family. It was for her online image. The public relations disaster was her only focus. "I didn't write the article, Chloe," I said simply. "Well, you have to fix it. You have to issue a statement. Tell them they got it wrong, that we're a close, supportive family. Tell them we're proud of you." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. She was asking me to lie, to create a fiction to protect her from the consequences of their own actions. Before I could respond, I heard Leo's voice shouting in the background, "Give me the phone!" The line went silent for a second, and then my brother's voice, tight with fury, came on. "What the hell did you do, Ethan? Did you talk to this reporter? Did you feed him this sob story to make us look bad?" "I've never spoken to the reporter in my life, Leo," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Then how did he know? How did he know we were in Vegas? You did this. You set us up. You were always jealous of my success, and this is your pathetic little revenge." The accusation was so predictable, so perfectly in character for him, that I almost laughed. He couldn't conceive of a world where he wasn't the main character, where my life had its own narrative independent of him. "My life doesn't revolve around you, Leo," I said, the words feeling liberating. "This isn't about you, this is about my work." "Your work?" he scoffed. "You mean this? This Blackwood thing? $5 million? Is that even real?" The jealousy was radiating through the phone. For the first time, my success was tangible. A dollar amount he could understand, and he couldn't stand it. "It's real," I said. And then I heard my father's voice, a low, dangerous rumble in the background. The phone was passed again. "Ethan," my father said, and the single word was laced with a cold fury I hadn't heard since I'd told him I was going to MIT. "You have 5 minutes to tell me exactly what is going on. And then you are going to get on a plane, come down to San Diego, and we are going to fix the mess you have made of this family's name." It wasn't a request. It was an order. The same kind of order he used on his foreman at a construction site. But I wasn't one of his employees. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't his scared, quiet son. The foundations of his world were cracking, and he had no idea that the man holding the sledgehammer was me. The barrage of phone calls was relentless, a coordinated assault from a family in full-blown panic mode. After my father's command, I simply said, "There's nothing to fix, Dad." The article reported the facts, and I hung up. It was the first time in my 30 years of life that I had ever hung up on him. The act itself felt momentous, a severing of a long-held chain. My phone immediately began to ring again. I silenced it, watching his name flash on the screen over and over. When he finally gave up, the texts began. They were a torrent of fury, disbelief, and commands. "Call me now. You are embarrassing this family. I demand an explanation." I read them with a strange sense of detachment, as if they were meant for someone else. The person they were yelling at, the quiet, compliant son who would have crumbled under this kind of pressure, no longer existed. He had been replaced by someone who had just been validated by the world in a way his family never could. After my father's failed attempts, my mother tried. Her call came next, and I decided to answer it. Her approach was different. Her voice was trembling, laced with a carefully curated sorrow. "Ethan, honey, what is happening? Your father is... I've never seen him like this. This article, it's tearing us apart. How could you let this happen?" Her use of the phrase, "let this happen," was a classic move from her playbook. It subtly shifted the blame to me, framing me as the negligent guardian of the family's peace, rather than the victim of their neglect. "I didn't let anything happen, Mom," I said, my voice even. "A reporter wrote a story. It's what they do." "But it's so personal," she sobbed. "It makes us sound like monsters. You know that's not true. We love you. We've always been proud of you." The lie was so bald, so audacious, that it stole my breath for a second. "Proud of me?" I asked, a dangerous calm settling over me. "Were you proud of me when you chose to go to Vegas instead of my graduation? Were you proud of me when Dad called my dissertation a paper and Leo called it a science project? Were you proud of all the years I called home, excited to share a breakthrough, only to be dismissed because it wasn't about the construction business?" The line went quiet. I had never spoken to her like this before. I had always swallowed my hurt, always accepted her placating excuses. Now, I was laying the truth at her feet, and she had no defense against it. We just didn't understand," she finally stammered. "It's all so complicated, what you do." "No, Mom," I countered. "It's not complicated. You don't need a PhD in physics to understand what it means to show up for your son. You just have to care enough to do it." And you didn't. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irrefutable. I could hear her crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. They were the tears of a woman finally being confronted with a truth she had spent a lifetime avoiding. "What do you want us to do, Ethan?" she whispered. "What will make this right?" "Nothing," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "There's nothing to do. It's done. The choices were made." Next came Chloe, again. This time, her panic had been replaced by a bizarre, opportunistic excitement. "Okay, so I've been thinking," she said, her voice a million miles an hour. "This is actually a huge opportunity for us, brand-wise. We can lean into this. We can craft a new narrative. A family coming together after a misunderstanding. Redemption. It's a super powerful story arc. We can do a joint interview, maybe on a morning show. You, me, Leo. We can all talk about how proud we are of you and how family is complicated, but love always wins." My followers would eat it up. I was speechless. She was already storyboarding our family trauma for social media engagement. She didn't see a broken family that needed healing. She saw a viral moment that could be monetized. "Chloe, this isn't a reality show," I said, my voice tired. "This is my life, and it's not for sale, and it's certainly not for content." "You're not thinking like a brand, Ethan," she said, frustrated. "You have to control the narrative, or it will control you." "I'm not a brand," I repeated firmly. "I'm a scientist, and I have no interest in controlling any narrative. The truth is out there. Let it speak for itself." Finally, Leo called. His anger had simmered down into a grudging, resentful confusion. He had clearly been reading about the Blackwood Fellowship, and the reality of its prestige was beginning to sink in. "Look," he started, forgoing any greeting. I looked up this Thorne guy. The Forge. This is like a big deal, isn't it? Like, big. Yes, Leo," I said. "It Island. So that $5 million, that's just for your research?" "It's not like take-home pay?" he asked, his business-oriented mind struggling to categorize it. It's a grant to fund my work, my lab, my team. It's to build things. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to reevaluate me, to fit me into a new box now that the nerdy brother label was no longer sufficient. So, you're going to be rich? He finally asked, the question hanging in the air. I'm going to be busy, Leo, I corrected him. So, what now? He asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. You just going to go off and be a super genius and not talk to us ever again? I don't know, I said honestly. I haven't thought that far ahead. Well, Dad is losing his mind, he said, a statement of fact, not sympathy. He's talking about suing the newspaper for defamation. He's talking about, I don't know. He's not used to not being in control. I know, I said. Maybe it's time he got used to it. The series of calls left me emotionally drained but strangely empowered. Each conversation had followed a predictable pattern, revealing the core of each family member's character. Chloe's narcissism, Leo's transactional jealousy, my mother's desperate desire for a peaceful facade, and my father's rage at his loss of control. They weren't reacting to me, to Ethan, the person. They were reacting to a situation, a public relations crisis. Their apologies, their panic, their sudden interest, none of it was about me. It was about them. And that realization was the most liberating of all. For years, I had twisted myself into knots trying to earn their love and respect, believing that if I could just be smart enough, successful enough, they would finally see me. Now, I understood that their vision wasn't obscured by my failures, but by their own limitations. They couldn't see me because they could only see themselves. The phone rang again. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. I've booked a flight. I'm coming to Pasadena. We are going to talk about this face to face. Tomorrow. The storm was no longer distant. It was about to make landfall, and I would be waiting for it. The next day, my father arrived not with a plea for forgiveness, but with a battle plan. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, dressed in a sharp, dark suit, looking less like a contrite father and more like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover. He walked into my sparsely furnished living room, his expensive leather shoes echoing on the hardwood floor, and surveyed the boxes and stacks of books with a look of undisguised disdain. "This is where you live?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's a bit different from the Vegas suite, I know," I replied, remaining seated in my armchair. I refused to stand, refused to give him the immediate physical deference he was accustomed to. He ignored my comment and got straight to the point. "We have a problem," he said, his voice the low, commanding rumble he used in boardrooms. "This story has damaged our family's reputation, and by extension, the company's. Some of our more image-conscious clients have been calling. They're concerned about the optics." "The optics?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "That's what this is about for you. Not the fact that you abandoned your son on his graduation day, but the optics of being caught." He waved a dismissive hand. "We can dissect the past later. Right now, we need a strategy for containment and recovery. I've had our PR team working all night. They've drafted a statement for you to release." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and placed it on the coffee table between us. "It clarifies that the reporter took your story out of context, that our family has always been immensely proud of your academic pursuits, and that our absence at the ceremony was due to a non-negotiable, pre-existing business commitment of immense importance. It paints a picture of unity." I looked at the paper but didn't touch it. "It paints a picture of a lie," I said quietly. He sighed, the sound of a man whose patience was wearing thin. "Ethan, this is how the world works. It's about managing the narrative. Your narrative, right now, is making us look bad. And when the family looks bad, the business suffers. Everything I have built is tied to the Hayes name." A name you seem determined to tarnish. I'm not the one who tarnished it, I said, my voice rising slightly. You did. You, Mom, Leo, Chloe. You all made your choices. The reporter just held up a mirror to them. Don't blame me for the reflection you see. He stared at me, his eyes narrowing. He was realizing that his usual tactics, intimidation, command, the sheer force of his will were not working. I was no longer the malleable, eager-to-please son he had always known. So, he changed his strategy. He moved from commander to negotiator. All right, he said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. Let's talk about your future. This Blackwood Fellowship. It's impressive. I'll admit, I underestimated you. The grant, the prestige, it's a significant achievement. He paused, letting the compliment hang in the air, a rare and calculated offering. But what happens after? In 5 years, the grant money runs out. You'll be in your late 30s. What's your long-term plan? Academia doesn't pay well. You know that. I just looked at him, waiting. I knew this was a preamble to something else. I have a proposal for you, he continued, leaning forward. Hayes Construction is diversifying. We're moving into smart home technology, sustainable building materials. We need a research and development division. A real one. I want you to head it. We'll build you a state-of-the-art facility, right there in San Diego. Give you a budget that would make your university colleagues weep. Name your salary? 7 figures? Done. A seat on the board? Of course. You can be the brains of the operation. You can have the lab, the resources, the respect. And you can do it all as a Hayes, helping to build the family legacy, not off in some remote mountain compound run by recluses. There it was, the bribe. A golden, glittering offer designed to appeal to every insecurity he thought I had. It was a chance to have everything I had ever wanted. His respect, a place in the family business, unlimited resources for my work, and financial security beyond my wildest dreams. 10 years ago, I would have accepted it in a heartbeat. I would have crawled over broken glass for that kind of offer. But standing there, in the wreckage of my past expectations, I saw the offer for what it truly was. It was a cage. A much larger, more luxurious cage than the one I had escaped, but a cage nonetheless. It wasn't an apology, it was a business transaction. He wasn't trying to mend our relationship. He was trying to acquire a valuable asset he had suddenly discovered in his own backyard. He wanted to own my success, to put the Hayes Construction logo on it. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the jacaranda tree in the courtyard. Its purple blossoms a vibrant splash of color in the drab landscape. You still don't get it, I said, my back to him. He was silent, waiting. I turned to face him, and for the first time, I felt no fear, no intimidation, only a deep, profound pity. You think my respect is for sale. You think you can buy my forgiveness with a 7-figure salary and a fancy lab. You think my life's work is just another subsidiary you can acquire for the family empire. I walked back and picked up the piece of paper with the PR statement on it. I tore it in half, then in half again, and let the pieces fall onto the coffee table. My work was never about the money. It was about the discovery. It was about pushing the boundaries of what's possible. This Blackwood Fellowship. It's not a job, Dad. It's a calling. It's a chance to work with the brightest minds on the planet, free from the kind of corporate agenda you're proposing. It's freedom, the kind of freedom you can't buy. His face, which had been a mask of calculated negotiation, finally broke. The raw, unfiltered fury returned. Freedom? He roared, standing up. You call abandoning your family freedom? You call humiliating us in front of the entire world freedom? You are a Hayes. You have a duty, an obligation to this family, to the name I built. My only duty is to the truth, I said, my voice unwavering. And the truth is, this family is broken, not because of a newspaper article, but because you built it on a foundation of conditional love. and I will not spend my life trying to meet conditions that were designed for me to fail. So that's it? He demanded, his hands clenched into fists. You're choosing them. A bunch of strangers, a secretive foundation, over your own blood? No, I said, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. I'm choosing me. The finality of the words seemed to suck the air out of the room. He stared at me, his face a maelstrom of anger, confusion, and something I had never seen before: defeat. He had come here with a plan, with offers and threats, armed with a lifetime of authority. And he had lost. He had lost because he was trying to negotiate with a son who no longer existed. He turned, wordlessly, and walked out of my apartment, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed in the quiet room, a punctuation mark on the end of my old life. The confrontation was over. The turning point had been reached. I was finally, completely, on my own. And I had never felt more free. 10 months later, I was standing on a cantilevered balcony extending from the side of a mountain, looking down at a valley shrouded in the morning mist of Northern California. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. Below me, nestled in the heart of Serenity Peak, was the Forge. It wasn't a building so much as a campus, a stunning architectural marvel of glass, reclaimed wood, and dark steel that seemed to grow organically out of the mountainside. It was a place where the line between nature and technology blurred, a physical manifestation of Eris Thorne's philosophy. This was my new home, my new life. The quiet, windowless lab in the sub-basement of Caltech felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. My work at the Forge was everything I had ever dreamed of and more. I was leading a small, brilliant team of material scientists and engineers, and we had been given a simple, impossibly difficult mandate: build the prototype for the next generation of interstellar probes. There were no budget meetings, no bureaucratic red tape, no quarterly reports. There was only the work. My days were filled with passionate debate, furious scribbling on smart glass walls, and the thrill of watching our ideas take physical form in the state-of-the-art fabrication labs. I was mentored by scientists whose papers I had studied as a student, legends in their fields who treated me not as a junior fellow, but as a peer. I was seen, I was valued, and I was doing the work I was born to do. I was happy, genuinely, profoundly happy. My relationship with my family, however, was a far more complex and slowly evolving entity. After my father stormed out of my apartment, there was a period of absolute silence that lasted for nearly a month. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was a Cold War, with both sides dug into their positions. I used that time to move to Serenity Peak and immerse myself in my new life. I accepted their silence, believing it might be the new permanent state of our relationship. The first crack in the ice came, surprisingly, from Leo. He sent me a text one night that was so uncharacteristically humble it almost made me drop my phone. It was a link to an article in a business journal about the economic challenges facing traditional construction firms in the age of new, sustainable technologies. His text simply read, "Dad will never admit it, but this stuff is killing us. What you're doing, with the new materials, is that the future?" It was the first time he had ever acknowledged my work as relevant. It was a small, tentative question, an admission of vulnerability. I texted him back, explaining in simple terms the potential applications of my research in civil engineering. It led to a slow, stilted exchange that continued over several weeks. He was curious, asking questions, trying to understand my world for the first time. Next came my mother. She sent me a handwritten letter, the first I had ever received from her. It was long and rambling, filled with crossed-out words and tear stains on the paper. It wasn't an excuse or a justification. It was an apology. She apologized for not standing up for me, for choosing peace over her son's happiness, for being too weak to challenge my father's narrow worldview. She wrote, "I was so focused on holding the family together that I didn't realize I was letting it break in the most important places. I see you now, Ethan. I just hope it's not too late." I called her after I read it. We cried together on the phone, a messy, cathartic conversation that didn't fix everything, but it opened a door that had been sealed shut for decades. Chloe's transformation was, in true Chloe fashion, public. She stopped posting about luxury brands and started a new content series about reconnecting with what matters. It was performative, of course, but there was a kernel of something genuine in it. She started volunteering at a STEM program for underprivileged girls, posting about the importance of science and education. She called me one day to ask if I would do a live stream with her for her followers, to talk about my journey. I politely declined, telling her that my work was more important than my story. She surprised me by understanding. "Okay," she said quietly. "I get it. But for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I was such a brat." My father was the last holdout. He was a man carved from granite, and he did not yield easily. But even he couldn't ignore the changing tides. With Leo now questioning the company's direction, and my mother no longer acting as his unconditional supporter, his fortress of certainty began to crumble. He didn't call, he didn't write. Instead, one day, a package arrived at the forge for me. Inside was a small, heavy object wrapped in oilcloth. I unwrapped it to find my grandfather's old slide rule, the one he had used to build his first houses in the 1950 seconds. It was a family heirloom, a sacred object my father kept on his desk. Tucked inside the leather case was a short, handwritten note on Hayes Construction letterhead. It said, "Your grandfather was a builder, but he was also a man of science. He understood that you can't build a future with the tools of the past." It seems I forgot that lesson. He would have been proud of you. There was no apology, no admission of fault, but coming from him, it was the equivalent of a sonnet. It was an offering of peace, a recognition of a shared legacy. Our family is not fixed. The cracks are still there, the history of hurt is real. We are not the happy, unified family from my mother's fantasies or Chloe's proposed PR campaign. We are something more real, more fragile. We are a group of people learning to see each other for the first time. They are slowly beginning to understand that my worth was never something they had the power to bestow upon me. It was something I had to build for myself, in the quiet, lonely labs where they never thought to look. And I am learning that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, but about accepting it and choosing to build a different future. The greatest lesson I've learned is that you cannot wait for others to validate your existence. Your value is not determined by the presence or absence of applause from the people you love. It is forged in the fires of your own passion, your own resilience, your own relentless pursuit of the things that set your soul on fire. You have to be your own anchor. If you've ever felt like your dreams were invisible to the world, if you've ever had to fight to be seen, share your story in the comments below. What did you do to find your own validation? Your story matters. And if this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe. You are not alone. Thank you for listening. And may you find the courage to step out of the shadows and into your own brilliant, lonely orbit.